Generally, I don't believe in guilty pleasures because really, if something is moral, legal, and brings you joy, there's usually no reason to feel guilty about it. Like, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City is genuinely entertaining, and I don't care who knows that I watched every damn episode. Although if I'm to be honest, I am getting a little annoyed at the how did Heather get a black eye storyline. It's like, come on. But I do have one pleasure that I think justifiably guilty about, and that is professional American football. The guilt is because by watching, betting on, buying tickets for, and buying merch for NFL games, I'm supporting a truly unhealthy activity. For more on that, check out this ancient video I made talking about the epidemic of concussions that the NFL tried and failed to cover up. Like, that's some evil shit. I should definitely stop watching it. And yet, last Monday, I was glued to the TV watching the Bills play the Bengals when the Bills safety, Damar Hamlin, suddenly collapsed following a tackle. I'll pause here to say that as of this recording, which is a few days before it goes live, Hamlin is still critically ill, but he's alive, he's awake, he's able to move his limbs, and he's able to speak, which is most likely thanks to an immediate response by medical personnel who gave him life-saving treatment within a minute of his collapse. Hamlin's ordeal was scary and also confusing for those of us who were watching because the tackle didn't even look that bad. The NFL forbids head-to-head contact to avoid concussions and serious spinal injuries, but they do still happen. So at first I thought, that's what must have happened. But replays of the tackle showed that probably wasn't the problem. But I'm not a doctor, so who knows? And who am I to speculate? Who is anyone to speculate based on seeing a few seconds of this man's life and knowing nothing else? Well, lack of general or direct knowledge has never stopped the internet from speculating, and my Twitter feed quickly filled up with people guessing what exactly went wrong, or outright stating it with authority. I even saw a few doctors chime in, which at first I was a bit grossed out about because diagnosing from afar, even as a professional, is this moral gray area that can contribute to misinformation. But then I realized there was so much bigger misinformation out there that actual experts, many of them were weighing in, I think in the hope that it would bend the average toward the truth. So maybe it was worth it. Because the misinformation was mostly, oh my God, it must have been vaccines. Like, let us count the ways that is an extremely stupid conclusion to come to. First, while most NFL players are vaccinated, there is no vaccine mandate in the NFL for players. So no one even knew for sure whether or not Hamlin was vaccinated. As far as I can tell, Hamlin himself never commented publicly on vaccines. His social media was mostly about things like his toy drive for disadvantaged youth in his hometown, which was launched into the stratosphere after his catastrophe Monday. And I just wanted to slip that in because it is extremely wholesome and I love it. Second of all, study after study after study show that the risk of an adverse cardiac event following COVID-19 vaccination is extraordinarily low and far lower than the risk of such an event following an actual COVID-19 infection. For instance, here's a study published in the British Medical Journal last summer that reviewed more than 8,000 cases across nearly 50 studies that found myocarditis and pericarditis risk was extraordinarily rare and predominantly mild. Now, that study and all the others also found that the risk, while rare, was highest in young cis men aged 12 to 29. I say cis only because I don't know that there's even enough data to talk about the effects on someone who was assigned male at birth but who transitioned at puberty or vice versa. I just wanted to be accurate. That cohort of young men, we might imagine, is more likely to be filled with dedicated athletes at some level. So we might also imagine the risk of those events would be, on average, higher in athletes, but still rare, still mostly mild. Yet, anti-vaxxers have decided that the COVID-19 vaccines have led to an epidemic of athletes dropping dead suddenly. So, when Hamlin collapsed on Monday, they seized the opportunity to control the narrative in that crucial time when everyone was paying attention and talking about this, and no one knew for sure what had actually happened. Obviously, he #died suddenly, which is the name of an anti-vax propaganda movie that put out this idea that athletes are dying suddenly because of the vaccine. Actual working cardiologist Dr. Peter McCullough even went on Tucker Carlson to spread this lie to his drooling, credulous audience, pointing to a letter to the editor that he wrote in the Scandinavian Journal of Immunology, in which McCullough claimed that from January 2021 to the time of writing, presumably end of 2022, 1,598 athletes suffered cardiac arrest, 1,101 of which with deadly outcome. Notably, in a 38 years time span, 1,101 athletes under the age of 35 died due to various heart-related conditions, 50% of whom had congenital anatomical heart disease and cardiomyopathies, and 10% had atherosclerotic heart disease with early onset. As Dr. Eric Burnett points out over on Twitter, McCullough took that 38-year number from a study that carefully defined which athletes they included and what qualifies as a sudden cardiac death. That study's authors took pains to point out that the number of athletes they found was certainly lower than the true number of athletes who have died from cardiac issues because of a lack of reporting data and also their own strict inclusion requirements that made sure that every death they counted was truly due to sudden cardiac arrest. And so what does McCullough compare that very carefully crafted number to? A blog run by anti-vaxxers, ironically called Good Sciencing, which claims to list 1,616 athlete cardiac arrests, serious issues, 1,114 of them dead since COVID injection. Burnett does us all a favor by going through them and detailing some of the athletes who died of cardiac arrest since COVID injection. A 27-year-old sprinter who died from suicide, a 24-year-old cyclist who died from suicide, a 49-year-old former shot put champion who died in a car accident, a 17-year-old high school basketball player who drowned in a hot tub, a 24-year-old footballer who got myocarditis after COVID and didn't die, a 26-year-old footballer who died from leukemia, a 16-year-old hockey player with unknown vaccination status who had myocarditis following COVID and didn't die, and a 69-year-old man who was a keen runner who fell off a cliff, which is horrible and tragic, but darkly humorous that anti-vaccine extremists are so desperate they'd blame vaccines for a poor old man falling off a cliff. Remember back in 2020 when these exact same people were screaming from the rooftops that doctors were surely blaming COVID for any death where someone just had COVID, even if it wasn't the cause of death? They made up these unhinged scenarios, like a person with COVID died in a car accident and then becoming a COVID death statistic. They are literally doing that. They are doing exactly the thing that they accused doctors of doing, and now they are doing it on Tucker Carlson. And the worst part is that all of their lies are based on exploiting these inherently tragic cases, leaving the surviving family members of suicide victims to step up and say, no, it wasn't the vaccine. And in cases like Damar Hamlin's, the victim himself is going to be subjected to this complete idiocy. And they're going to distract from the very real danger that athletes in contact sports face. And even non-contact sports. These things are dangerous. I remember 20 years ago reading about a little leaguer getting hit in the chest with a pitch at exactly the wrong time, in between heartbeats in a way that normally, it would result in a bruise. But in this case, it resulted in a severe cardiac event and the kid died. And there was an immediate call for better safety equipment. And in the years since I was a player, I've seen an improvement in the gear that we give children playing baseball and softball, trying to better protect their heads and their chests. If we had had a large community of people back then screaming that the problem was actually demonic spirits or whatever, that would have been a terrible distraction. And it's a distraction now when the demonic spirits are supposedly in our vaccines. So I wish all of the best for Hamlin's continued recovery, both just, because he's a human and also he seems like a really great person. And I really hope that the anti-vaxxers don't pull focus from an actual good takeaway here, which is that professional sports teams need to do as much as they can to protect the athletes who are making team owners and league commissioners billionaires. I don't know how this particular very rare incident could have been prevented in football, but I do know that there continues to be a collective looking the other way about brain injuries. And it makes me think that maybe there's more we can be doing to protect the entire body of these athletes who are, putting themselves on the line for our entertainment. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.